Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Alex, aka Polymonster, and I'm going to try and render some polygons in macOS in my Metal graphics engine, in my Rust graphics engine with the Metal backend. The problem is that the whole thing's a mess. I did a little stream before about it, trying to get some of the samples working. I got one of them working, got the triangle was working, and then I was looking at the texture bind full sample, and the bindless samples. I know on second inspection, it was worse than I thought. So what's happened is I was working on this in parallel on PC and experimenting with some other stuff. And the branches have just become a mess to merge. So I'm just going to have to go back to basics. So that should give me enough to go from, but I guess let's see if we can just get this started from scratch. What's going to happen now is that in the OS API, we're not Windows, we need to have a macOS backend. And this actually is not macOS, it's actually WinInit, or WinIt, that is called. But if you know what a WinIt is, probably not the best thing to talk about, but that can be renamed later. So we have a null backend. Oh, and then we've got macOS, right? And I'm missing dependencies now. Right, so we've got Windows dependencies, and we had macOS dependencies. obj now, which is deprecated. Metal is deprecated, so this is not great. This is also a bad thing about doing stuff, and kind of over time now I have to fix that up at some point. So have these changed? So what's changed in this API is that app and window, which are traits, they have now had to become clone for changes elsewhere. So I had to derive clone, but then their internal members, which wrap the back end of WinInit. So there's inside the app, there's WinInit event loop, and inside the window, there's WinInit window, are not clonable. So to fix that, the way I resolved it is to put them inside an atomic reference count. For the window, this was enough. So that means it could be passed around to different threads, and then the threads will keep a reference to that object. But for the event loop, it also writes to it and it mutates it. So it needs to be inside an RW lock to make it thread safe. And these might be accessed and used on different threads, potentially because of the architecture of the engine. You might want to, if you don't need to be multi-threaded, you could just use reference count, or I could change how the cloning happens and look at the root cause of it. I thought for these things, they're fairly large objects. They shouldn't be used in many places, so I'll go with the atomic reference count. This is one thing I found with Rust. When you come to refactor, when you're building APIs, you change mutability, or you change something like you'd need to derive a clone or something like that. The amount of work you have to do propagates through your code base a lot deeper than it would with a C++ code, for example, or C code. Typically, I find if I'm refactoring an API or an interface in C, you just update where you call that function, you add the new parameters or whatever it may be. You don't end up with this kind of knock-on effect. And it definitely is a challenge with Rust. Obviously, this is part of the language. You're doing these kind of things up front. The compiler, the borrow checker, is making you think about memory safety, think about thread safety. But sometimes when you just want to get something working, you're refactoring and prototyping, it can be a bit of a thorn in your side. So here it actually did take me some time. This is probably about 10 minutes just going through to update the API and the functions in the macOS backend to allow the window and the app to be clonable. So here, because now it's in the RW lock, you can do write, so RW lock write, and then that passes you the event loop inside a closure. It needed to be mutable here. I'm going to have to do this kind of thing again for this. Okay, so I have fixed this now. That was annoying. It probably took me about 15 minutes just to fix up the API to now handle the cloning and that kind of thing. So let's see, we're going to fail compiling. ImGUI is not compiling. Then I had a bunch more changes to fix up ImGUI because of how I handle the ownership of enumerating display monitors. I had a function called enumerate display monitors, of which on Windows it just took a static self because of how Windows API works. You can just call a C global C function and it will give you the monitors. Whereas on macOS now with WinInit, you need the event loop to then query the available monitors. So that meant enumerate display monitors takes a self, and then ImGUI queries this because it can create windows on the different monitors. So then I had to change the front end of the ImGUI API. So when you create a context or an instance of ImGUI, you have to pass in the display monitors. And again, it's another change that had to propagate through, and a bunch of things had to be updated to get that to work. Right, now a bunch of the samples are failing. Windows should compile, so almost back to square one. And then once I've done this, I'm going to have to merge these changes into master, because otherwise it's just going to be too much effort. Maybe I'll put the maybe I'll put client and plugins and that kind of stuff on a feature. I'm just going to have to keep the two in sync, because otherwise I'll end up in a messy situation like I did last time. So let's see if we can build window. And let's see if it runs as well, obviously. All of the other samples aren't compiling, sadly, but at the moment, well, I'll find out what the errors are as we go along. Okay, it compiles. Does it run? Right, so we've got window working. What branch am I on? I'm on master. I'm going to go macOS rework. I'm going to add all of this. So then at this point, I start putting a pull request together for those changes to get the OS backend working for macOS with the changes merged in main. And then I go on a bit of a tangent and just start getting all of the samples compiling with the null graphics backend. This one took quite a while because there were quite a lot of changes that I will go through just after this. And then I needed to switch to Windows to make sure all of those changes are working inside the branch before merging them into main. Right, back in the world of Win32, we are in hotline already. Let's see how this can go. Here we go. Right, enumerate display monitors. This is the thing that I had to merge, and I had to make this a self. Right. Now, I actually did make a static for this. This probably could be refactored a bit better. Oh no. Now I'm doing the wrong shortcut for the Windows copy and paste. So then I had a bit of work to do to merge the changes that just incoming from macOS rework branch. Had a little bit of a scare because I ran some of the samples and the output wasn't outputting anything. It was just clear color. But in the end, I think it was down to the data being incorrect. That's another problem about switching branches, and sometimes if your data changes or your samples change, just everything needs to be clean and rebuilt. But definitely frustrated in this session as things were just not going to plan, not going smoothly, and feel like it was going Groundhog Day basically. This is just like, I've not even got anywhere yet. I've been around in circles. Right, so it is setting it. It gets shader heap. We set the root descriptor table. Okay. It should be working. Oh, it is working now. Huh. Right, so now if I run it, now it's working. It must have been a data issue. Like you have to build data in order to... This builds data when you run. Okay. That one's not correct. These ones should be... okay. The merge remote branch hasn't been merged. And then another mad scramble here when I realized I merged the wrong branch. I hadn't merged some prior changes into main. So then the changes I merged into the macOS branch for macOS rework were actually out of date. So that means there's more work to do. This is me just then trying to cobble that together. I think the moral of the story here is to just not try and have too many active branches at the same time. It just becomes too much to track. I need to just kind of keep the Win32 version and the macOS version, maybe, you know, occasional development thing, but keep them in sync, because this has been a good few sessions, coding sessions, just to kind of bring everything back up to parity with one another, and it's still only halfway complete now. Window. It's compiling my shaders first, building the data that we need. Eventually, hopefully, I will come. Right, we've got main loop and we've got a window. Right, working. Swap chain. That's the actual next one we need. And that should swap and change colors. Okay, that's working. The next one after that will be a triangle. Beautiful. The next one out of that will be bind full, where we bind textures discretely on the heap, and it's working, right? So the difference is now it letterboxes. Okay, like that. So it letterboxes, and it uses push constants on the vertex shader stage to do that. And then it uses, that's it. This sample uses one set of push constants only on the vertex shader stage. So that's basically what I want to be up to setting up next on macOS, which it did work. It was just the texture binding was done slightly incorrectly, or not in a sort of a generic way. It was using the direct set texture on Metal OS, which isn't, or Metal, sorry, which isn't the right way to do it. To bind the heap at an offset is the correct way that I want to do it. And then I have bindless now, which this one was colored green before. That was using push constants. So it uses push constants on the vertex shader stage. That does all of this letterboxing. And then it uses push constants on the fragment shader stage, or pixel shader stage, whatever you call it, which tell you the indices of these images. So that's the correct way to do it. Before, this was all a bit hard-coded, and when I started moving to Metal, the binding indices were slightly different to how they are in D3D, and essentially it just wasn't like multi-platform enough. So I sorted that out, and then also I had to deal with a mutability issue in the command buffer. So I just need to check the client runs, and also just check the samples in there. I'm going to run the tests locally, and hopefully we've got a few unused errors there. Right, here we go. Okay, so always seems to be favoring that one as the right. These are all working. Sometimes it's been crashing when changing to maybe the next one. No, it's this one, next one. It's working now. I don't know why, but there we go. That's everything. And these are ray tracing ones which weren't working anyway on this machine. They work on another machine. What else I can also do is, this has been actually quite slow, and I think I'm going to improve it. So I've got tests for this, which run those samples, the individual ones. I think I was doing some So here I just start running the unit test. These ones run on CI, but you can also run them locally. They just run those tests that you just saw, the ones in the client, plus the examples, but it runs it from cargo test and it dumps out a screenshot into a folder. I'm not doing anything more complicated than that at the moment. I'm not doing image compares or anything. It's just something to run to check they run and they don't crash. And then you can kind of give them once over just to verify them they're okay. In future, probably adding something that can, to automate that and automate the checking is good. But I've done this in the past and I've worked on systems which do it. And the image compare can be a bit fragile. So it's just something at this moment in time I'm not really going to bother doing. Right, they've all passed. 45 tests have passed. There are some other tests, just code ones as well for some of the APIs. But yeah, graphics tests are a bit of a pain because, they do take a while to run. They are flaky if you've not got the hardware. Sometimes you can have problems, just rendering stuff and it can go wrong. False positives, but I suppose it's useful to have them. And they have to run single-threaded here, so that's what makes them slower. Rust does want to run your tests in different threads, but you can't do that with the D3D device. So then it was just more Git stuff, merging branches, fixing conflicts, because, I had another pull request which I'd forgotten that I hadn't merged. And then it basically meant I ended up doing the same work multiple times. There I was just doing the self on the enumerate display monitors again. I feel like I've done this same work 10 times now. So hopefully it's in a better place now that I can start to really push on. Okay, cool. I managed to get the test working again. So the syntax in here, I only want pushes onto the main branch to trigger the tests because they do take a while to finish. But I want a pull request to trigger the tests because I'm going to likely be going into main. And also I don't have a signified single development branch. As explained in this session, I'm messy and I had a load of branches. So that's going to run now. Basically, everything should be running and these branches should be a bit more aligned. Next time, I can hopefully get back to macOS. I can make sure the triangle works, the swap chain works, and then hopefully get to sorting out the issues with bindless and bindful, where I need to do shader modifications to be able to specify which slots each buffer gets bound to so that the plumbing in the API side, in the front end, works correctly. I'm going to leave it there. That's been a mission today. And, what was that? It was about an hour or so. A frantic, just messing. But, right, made some progress, I think, hopefully. And I can carry on next time. Bye.